fantastic rewards, but they really nailed immersion and the feel of the various different classes involved. This video was actually scheduled for ages ago, but then Legion came out, and with it bringing class orders, I think this topic is far more relevant, since there really is a chance of some of this stuff happening. Now, I still remember heading over to the Warrior Island all those years ago to learn Berserker stance, and doing very similar things with the different classes. World of Warcraft is a role-playing game, and while that aspect has been greatly eroded over time, I still think it's possible to save that element of the game. Class quests allowed a hunter to feel like a hunter. Also, if you played the Warlock class quest that was added in patch 5.2, if you haven't, I highly recommend it because you really feel like a Warlock there. Not because of the lore, yes, the lore was fun, but they actually tailor the quest so well around the capabilities of a Warlock. And looking back, there are also class quests like with the Warlocks and say Paladins to get their mounts back in the day. They ended up changing things so that you just automatically learn your mount, but back then it was something that had to be earned. And I think that past design was far better. If you saw someone with that mount, you thought, damn, there's a Paladin who's done their epic quest. Their removal is just another instance of RPG aspects and mechanics being sacrificed at the altar of convenience. So, enough of that silliness, let's talk about actually getting these things back and what could be done. Specifically, what sort of gameplay would we actually get, and what rewards would it entail? Well, first of all, the recent Warlock quest needs to be mentioned. It offered a very specific class-based reward, and its gameplay was heavily based off the Warlock toolkit. It was also in the form of a scenario, which was pretty long and intricate, and that felt great, but I've got to assume they wouldn't be able to do the exact same formula for every class in the game without taking away from content elsewhere. That's fine, and what was really memorable was how the fights forced you to fully play a Warlock. It would probably be possible to create encounters like that without doing a big, massive, sprawling instance like what they did with the Black Temple. So, what we have established here is that the class-specific gameplay is what's really great. So how do you deliver that to people? Well, first of all, I think it should be more than a single set of small quests. These would be proper quest lines with quite a bit in the way of rewards. Since we're not really doing a massive scenario, I would imagine the scripting time needed would be quite a bit less overall, so content creation would be faster. Rather than creating specific content, they could just focus on using their quest designing tools to make stuff in the pre-established world. And not just the continent of the Broken Isles, no, it would be great to have stuff in other parts of the world that we don't really see that much, the sort of places which aren't really covered by the regular quest flow. This would be a great way to use the old world, which is doubly relevant since in Legion, well, apparently the whole of the planet is being invaded, so I think that would make a great deal of sense. The quest flow of these would probably be a mix of things, with the main highlight being very hard solo encounters designed around your class's toolkit. I wouldn't mind some more old school and RPG-ish designs to make it into something like this as well. Basically, let's throw convenience out the window, let's forget about all that stuff, and let's make something which is great, that stands on its own 2 feet. If the story of a questline involves us heading off to some far-off place that isn't convenient, then so be it. If a reward is epic enough and the story is compelling enough, then people will be happy to do it. They certainly were back during, say, the Rockdalar Hunter quest. Now, you might be thinking all this stuff is fine and well, but realistically 10 quests will only take the average player like a tiny amount of time. Yeah, these wouldn't be random pushover quests. They would be tuned to be very challenging for players who are raiding or wearing raid gear from the current tier, just like how the Warlock class quest of 6 or 5.2 was roughly done, and I'll remind you that it was very well received at the time. Hell, if these quests were being added in at the start of an expansion, then I would probably tune them so the latter stages would require an 80th percentile item level for the kind of player who is likely to make a few mistakes during a fight. Why? Well, challenge is very good, and these quests should be absolutely rock hard. Completing class questlines should be a mark of you being a very skilled player of that class. If someone is not willing to put the effort in, then tough luck. These quests would naturally be easier as time goes on and people get better gear, so by the end of an expansion, a lot more players would be able to complete the latter stages of one of these quests. I would put in a feat of strength that maybe comes with a title, so that the players who complete stuff, say within the first raid tier or whatever, are appropriately distinguished. Now overall, these would not be designed to be something that you can immediately do on all of your alts. As far as a skill requirement goes, you need to be fully familiar with the ins and outs of how your class plays. And by having this level of numerical and mechanical difficulty, you ensure this content lasts long into the future. Potentially, these kind of quests could offer meaningful gameplay for the duration of an expansion, and that could be very, very good for the game, plus it would also reinforce some skills that would be useful when raiding. So content patches would add to these class quests, such that maybe every 6 months, everyone would get something new for their class. I originally wrote this video before Legion, and I went into detail about this idea of a class-based faction that was out in the world. Well, oddly enough, that's pretty much what class orders are, so I suppose that's that part of the video covered. Now let's cover rewards. So first of all, they have been working on things like class accessories for quite a while. That's things like poison vials for rogues, quivers for hunters, and holy books for paladins. The most prestigious of these would ideally be from a class quest system. Also, some unique class-based rewards like, say, green fire would come from these quests, as would some skins for your, like, say, your artifact weapon. Putting gear on these is a very risky thing, though, in terms of, like, item-level gear. It allows for some really memorable and iconic weapons, but it also maybe makes them feel a bit mandatory to some players. What are your thoughts on this? Personally, I don't particularly mind as long as it is one option, but I'm interested to see what people's thoughts are. So ideally the way I would do this is that I would put a bunch of class accessories on maybe one of those like class order vendors, and to purchase things from that all you would need is maybe a certain amount of reputation and then maybe a currency of some sort. Since the rep only comes from the main quest line, this basically gives you incremental rewards as you progress through that quest line. There is no real way to grind up this rep, you can only gain it by doing the class quest. And the vendor would then, of course, just sell you some class-based cosmetic like consumables, convenience items, pets, transmog stuff, whatever. More simple stuff, with the actual really iconic rewards being left to just like being from the quests themselves. One reward which would probably be far too much work for Blizzard, but I think would be very cool, is having unlockable combat animation styles for your class. Sort of see it as being like another fighting style. Basically, the current animations are really old, and the new models make some of them look better, but when they were doing those new animations for the new models, they wanted them to feel pretty much the exact same as the current one. Now, I'm sure they would be able to make some really cool animation sets now, especially since it's over 10 years since many of the originals were made. And that's pretty much how I do it. Your class order would have an epic questline associated with it. There'd be some really tricky stuff, and the content would not be sort of designed to be killable by everyone during the first patch. Alongside this, I wouldn't mind having quests, perhaps daily or weekly, that are essentially you doing class-related tasks. So if you're a hunter, maybe you're going and hunting some particular sort of beast. Maybe if you're a priest, you're doing an exorcism, which would involve fighting a mini-boss. These are just little quests which are based around what your class actually would be doing, and they might even give you a currency, which is used to purchase the more low-key cosmetic or convenience items from your faction vendor. I think this would be overall a great way to provide some really nice, intrinsically satisfying rewards, along with some very challenging solo gameplay, which I'll remind you is something that the game pretty much doesn't have in many regards. Now, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of complaining over the first week of, oh, I can't do this, I can't, instantly get all the rewards, oh, poor me, boo-hoo, cry me a fucking river. As far as I'm concerned, in many ways, listening to that kind of feedback and taking way too much heat from it is one of the things which has led us into the position where the endgame has no journey and really outside of raiding has very little depth, which kind of sucks. So to end this video, what kind of class rewards would you like to see? I mean, stuff specific to your class. So say if you're a paladin, would you like to have like a different kind of wing? Maybe like you could change the color of your holy spells, maybe a different animation set for your particular class. It would be interesting to see what sort of stuff people like. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.